And not for the first time, Suella Braverman has gone rogue, launching an almighty attack on the police in an article for The Times, which Downing Street did not fully sign off. The Home Secretary questioned why, and I quote, right-wing and nationalist protesters who engage in aggression are rightly met with a stern response, yet pro-Palestinian mobs displaying almost identical behaviour are largely ignored, even when clearly breaking the law. You could say then that the Home Secretary has thrown a metaphorical two fingers up to her boss, the Prime Minister. So does Suella need to be sacked? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.com or tweet us at gbnews and do vote in the online poll. But to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome the columnist and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn, who's written a great article about this in The Spectator today, and the anti-racism activist Imarn Ayton. Imarn, it's our first time. Great to have you on the show. First of many, I've got no doubt. Do you think Suella needs to go?
Yes. Oh, my gosh. Yes, of course. She is an extremist. So the very thing that she complains about is the very thing that she does on a daily basis. Let's just include the fact that she spoke about multiculturalism being a failure. Let's just add one clear point here, OK? Her parents are Kenyan and Mauritius. Her husband is a Jew and her boss is an Asian man, and she is the Home Secretary of a country that is majority white. So in terms of multiculturalism, that is a perfect example of the success of multiculturalism in this country, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, during the fact that she is a success, she's decided to spend her time fueling the culture wars, left, right and centre, divide and more divide, and so, as opposed to calming the situation, diffusing the situation and bringing us all together as a nation. And this is why this woman needs to go. In fact, I should actually say, by right, she should be leading with a mug or a T-shirt that says, I am East African and proud. And instead she says, no, let's just make things more worse and divisive. So that's an issue. She needs to go. She needs to go.
That's very clear. Before I get to Patrick, you said about how she's inflaming tensions.
Yes.
Are the people on the streets of London calling for a holy war not inflaming tensions?
No, because we can't generalise. Can't generalise, OK?
Well, are those people inflaming tensions? The people calling for an intifada, which means suicide bombs on buses, are they inflaming tensions?
Oh, yes, a certain cohort, yes.
Well, she's condemning those people.
Yeah, and a certain cohort. We cannot generalise here. We cannot tar the same people with the same brush, right? That would be a generalisation. Therefore, prejudice, which
But when these things are being shouted out, why don't the marches disperse? Why do they get stronger every weekend?
Because we're talking about a cohort, a specific cohort within those marches that are extremists.
Okay.
And you cannot ignore the fact
enough.
that every community, every culture has an extremist cohort. That is a fact.
OK, Patrick, Patrick, has she got to go?
Absolutely not. I must say that, Imarn, you said probably made about 25 points.
I have, indeed.
I'm glad you've been listening. I disagree with all 25 of them.
All right.
I particularly disagree. Let's take them roughly from the beginning.
Go ahead.
You say that Suella should be seen as an example of why multiculturalism is a success,
and extremism,
right?
and extremism, Patrick.
It's ridiculous to think she's an extremist. If you look at the polling, she's square in the middle of British public opinion.
No, she's not.
Right?
She doesn't represent
but anyway,
the general consensus of the public.
If I could just answer.
You spoke very well.
Yeah. The multiculturalism point, Suella Braverman has bought into majority British culture, right? Her point about multiculturalism failing, I think, was amply demonstrated the day after the October 7th Hamas pogrom. There were people in Acton, people on the Edgware Road in London, dressed in Middle East garb and robes, waving Palestinian flags, celebrating. At that stage, not a single bomb had been dropped on Gaza. They were celebrating a pogrom. They were entirely motivated by their own obsession with homeland, co-religion, country of origin conflicts. They hadn't integrated Britain at all. I thought there was an absolute home run for Suella on her point that multiculturalism has failed in certain not across the board, but that the integration challenge hasn't been met. And I also think her article today is perfectly reasonable, very moderately put, and I think it's undeniable. I think it's undeniable that the police...
Moderately put?
Yes, particularly...
Really? Moderately put? That was your sentence. Moderately put.
OK, well, I'll break off and try to have my turn and say, tell me a single phrase that you thought was explosive or irresponsible.
Multiculturalism has failed.
That's not what she said in the Times. That's from weeks ago. But
that was the most recent.
I'm saying her article
OK,
was
Patrick, I'll come back to you in a moment. Imarn?
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was the most recent article in terms of what she said.
What was immoderate in that article?
So fair enough. So what you're talking about is something that she spoke about recently, as opposed to all the things that she's said over the time that she's been a Home Secretary for the last year. So let's just talk about the real thing that made a real headline. Multiculturalism has failed. Let's just be clear. This woman...
Something said by Angela Merkel 10 years ago.
OK, no problem. Right, you're accurate. So let's just talk about the fact that Suella Braverman said this, OK? This is a woman who is, her parents were Kenyan her parents are Kenyan and Mauritius. Her husband is a Jew. Her boss is an Asian man. I've already said this, because this is the point.
I tell you what.
You cannot talk about multiculturalism has failed when you are East African ruling this country. That's a fact.
OK, Patrick, OK, Imarn, I'll come back to you. Imarn?
You have now very heavily implied that Suella Braverman's own ethnicity should shut down her intellectual freedom to think about what is best for the country that she's grown up in, that is her country. You're implying that there's an inherited duty of someone from an ethnic minority background to take a certain set of attitudes on things like multiculturalism, on things like immigration. Now, if that's true, nobody from an ethnic minority background could ever be Home Secretary because they couldn't have their own intellectual independence. And I think that is the most divisive attitude possible, and we should be a society where everyone, no matter what their skin colour, what their ethnic background, is entitled to say what they think is the best for their society.
And Imarn, let me give you the last word. Now, Patrick, that was great. Imarn, the clock's against us, right? And I'll let you have your say.
Sorry.
I just want to put one point to you on the multicultural issue, which is, if multiculturalism is working, why are 300,000 British Jews afraid to leave the house?
This is what happens with Black people. Black people are afraid to work in certain areas. Black people are afraid to go into certain areas.
Are there people on the streets of Britain calling for the death of black people?
Well, there were as a result of the Black Lives Matter protests. That is a fact.
Okay.
So this is the point.
Okay, final thought.
Thank you. There are extremist cohorts within every community. That needs to be taken into consideration. That is a fact of life. In terms of people being extremists, well, she has been extremist in terms of the fact that we need to take into consideration that she is East African. And the fact that she's talking about people not being able to express... No, yes, she's British, but she's also East African. So therefore, it is heritage. Heritage, exactly. Yes. So therefore, she is being hypocritical. She's being hypocritical and generalising when she talks about protests, and she talks about everyone being tarred with the same brush. That is hypocritical, and that is generalisation.
I just finished by saying Rishi Sunak, also another point, has no mandate. Right, he wasn't elected by the British people. The British people more agree with Suella Braverman than they do with him. So I would say he needs to wind his neck in. That's not the general consensus. That is not. You've seen the Palestinian protests. That is actually inaccurate.
I think we can all agree.
That's not the general consensus of Britain. That is a fact.
An hour. Let me tell you, Imarn, it was your first time.
Sorry.
It will be the first of many.
Thank you.
My thanks to my old friend Patrick O'Flynn and anti-racism activist Imarn Ayton. A great debate. It's what this show's all about. It's what this place is all about.